First and foremost, then, an event taking place on the 26th of June. Tell us more.
Yep, coming up in a couple of weeks' time. So on Wednesday, the 26th of June, we have The Time Is Now, because the time is now to take action for climate change. The momentum's been growing on the Isle of Man, and we've seen those marches and protests by the students, and now it's our turn. So on the Wednesday, 26, we'll be marching from 1 o'clock outside the Promenade Church. We'll be meeting earlier. We'll be there from 11 o'clock. So if you fancy some tea and cake and gossip and making some banners, we're also going to live stream and hook up to the UK, because this is part of a bigger march. This is part of a bigger protest. In the UK, The Time Is Now is meeting in London, and they're going to march on Westminster. On the Isle of Man, the time is now, and we'll be meeting at 1 p.m. outside the Promenade Methodist Church, and we'll be marching along Strand Street and up to Tynwald.
You mentioned to me just off mic that this was in coordination with the event in the UK. Part of the reason for a separation between the UK and the Isle of Man is there's some slightly different asks that are being put to government here.
I was approached with my Christian Aid hat on and asked to participate in the UK Time Is Now march, so that's what brought it to my attention a few months ago. And I thought to myself, well, I can't do that. We can't take people over and waste all that carbon going over there. Apart from anything else, their asks are different. We've got very different specific asks on the Isle of Man. This march, we're focusing on fare free for your transport. We're focusing on keeping fossil fuels in the ground, and we're focusing on divestment.
So tell us a bit about what that process is of putting these asks to politicians. Is there going to be direct engagement at Tynwald? Is that the idea of the march?
Yes. We're going to, as I say, we're going to march along Strand Street, up Finch Hill to Tynwald. We'll congregate outside Tynwald. And then we have 3 speakers who are going to speak on each of the topics. And then we're going to be handing over those asks. I can ask you, if you do want to join us, bring a clock with you, and the purpose of the clock will become clear.
And have you communicated with politicians ahead of this already? Are they aware it's happening?
Well, they will be shortly when I send the email out. So, yes, the politicians are aware that the time is now to act. We are looking for them. There's been a lot of lobbying going on, especially ahead of the Tynwald debate on Tuesday. We are looking for them to make sure they make the right decision for the right reasons, and that it's not just greenwashing. The public out there are watching them and watching what they do, and we want to know that they're acting in not only our best interest, but the environment and the world's best interests.
A recap then, of course, in last month's sitting of Tynwald, Daphne Kane put a motion to encourage the court to acknowledge the climate emergency.
Yes.
3 amendments were put to that motion, one from the Environment Minister, to which there was a vote. The houses were divided, so that's been adjourned to then reappear this Tuesday. The results of what happens then in this month's sitting dictate a bit on the tone of the event on the 26th, perhaps.
Well, there's certainly the lobbying going on at the moment and the continuing conversations. I look at my newsfeed and I look at all the information that's coming through, and everything's about climate. Things are changing rapidly. The Climate Change Coalition on the Isle of Man have recently agreed that we are wanting a 2035 zero net carbon target.
Which, of course, is Laurie Hooper's amendment, which would be voted on if the Environment Minister's is not agreed. So.
It is, yes, it is. And we are lobbying politicians, and we are asking our supporters, and we're asking everybody who cares about what happens to our climate to write to their MHKs and to ask them to support Laurie Hooper's amendment.
The headlines in the UK this month have been, particularly from the UK Chancellor, who sort of banded the figure of £1 trillion in the UK to try and meet these net zero emissions targets there. And I think the implication was that investment would be perhaps to the detriment of education and health budgets in the UK.
They do like banding around these ridiculously large figures. We won't go down Brexit and the NHS route.
But is there a perception then that a 2035 target is achievable and is financially realistic?
It's absolutely achievable and absolutely realistic, especially on the Isle of Man. The power station we have needs renewing in 2034. So we need to be planning for that eventuality anyway. The common sense tells us that we need to be moving away from fossil fuels. Apart from anything else, it's completely unsustainable, yet look where we are. Look what we've got around us. We've got wind, we've got solar, we've got lots of different options available to us, and that's easily tapped into. And in the long run, that's going to prove the most economical. But it's like everything, you need to make an investment, but we're going to have to make an investment anyway, so let's make the sensible and the right investment.
An argument you hear from perhaps climate skeptics, if that's the word, or perhaps people who are less convinced by some of the policies of the Climate Change Coalition, perhaps, is that the Isle of Man is a drop in the water, if you pardon the pun, in sort of the global context. And that changes made here perhaps don't have a huge bearing on climate change from the perspective of the whole world. What kind of impact can we be having? Should we be lobbying perhaps the bigger polluters overseas?
There's a large amount of impact that it can have, and it's really, really important that every single person does their thing. If you think about back when you were a child and how things have changed in just how our attitude of how disposable we are, we used to reuse things. Even cleaning in the house, you've now got these wipes that you dispose of. What's wrong with the duster? These little things all build up to make big things, but there's other big changes we can make. Looking at how you spend your money and how you save your money, looking at divesting, making sure that we invest away from fossil fuels. So when you go and open your savings account, go and ask your bank, where does my money get saved? Are you investing in fossil fuels? And lobby your bank. There's massive changes you can make. Now, with my environmental hat on, I've gone out and I've been in Africa and I've seen the changes. I've seen the changes in the weather patterns. These guys are at the sharp end. On the Isle of Man, we don't see it as much
yet.
No. But you ask the farmers on the Isle of Man, the farmers will tell you the weather patterns are changing. Change is happening here. It's not as noticeable. But the people in Africa are at the real sharp end of it. These guys, the animals are dying, the crops are failing, they're dying, it's causing migration of population, it's causing further war, it's causing conflict. It all has knock-on effects, and it has knock-on effects to us here too. It'll affect our prices in food, it'll affect food availability, it'll affect how we can move around. So everybody has that bit to play. This conversation has been going for as long as I can remember, and the sense of urgency has to be now, which is why the time is now, which is why we're having the march. Come out and join us. The students have done it. It's our turn now to stand up and to be counted for. It's our turn to show the MHKs that we don't want greenwashing. We want real, true action. We want them to be courageous. We want them to make the right decisions. We don't want them just to nod and smile amendments through for the sake of it because it sounds good. We want real change and real actions now, which will safeguard our children, our grandchildren's future all the way down the line.